Hello, you are tuned in to AWANI Review. My name is Cynthia Ng. Global trade has never been more unpredictable. Tariffs changing overnight, supply chains tested, and policies shifting faster than anyone can plan for. For CEOs today, it is not just about chasing growth, but staying agile in a world where the rules keep changing. So joining me on the show today, I'm very honored to have Professor Joseph Cherian. He's the CEO of the Asia School of Business to talk about how leaders can plan smarter and stay ahead amid the chaos. So first of all, Professor, great to have you back on the show, and thank you for having us here at ASB.
Thank you very much.
So as I mentioned earlier, the world is changing so fast. So let's start with that, right? So if you look at how business leaders plan, traditionally they look at 5-year plan, long-term plan, but that may no longer be relevant because we can't even anticipate what's going to happen in the next 5 months. So what should they be thinking at this point?
Right. Every business leader goes through this process of what's called risk management. That means to figure out within the parameters of the world that we live in, how do we plan ahead 5 years, 10 years, whatever. What's going on is risk management usually means you know what the potential outcomes are going to be and what the likelihood or the probability of those outcomes. And then you can sort of manage what do I do in this kind of situation and do some assessments and make some optimal decisions. That's risk management. There's also something called uncertainty. That means you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. You don't know what the likelihoods are going to be. You're in a chaotic situation because policies change randomly. So when the policy changes randomly, you really have your work cut out for you. Because how do you plan in this kind of situations? I think that's what's going on with most business leaders and even governments. They're trying to figure out what's going on next. What do we do in these different circumstances? So I think that's where we are. It's become more difficult to navigate through the uncertainty that's going on because of the uncertainty of uncertainty.
So yes. Just going to your point there, I think what's happening is the uncertainty is heightened now. For a leader today, what should they be thinking to plan ahead for their businesses?
Okay, so if you're talking about traditional risks, the kinds that we are familiar with, there could be some disruptions, there could be some temporary natural disasters. We know how to navigate around those, so we can plan accordingly, and we can even use financial markets to hedge against those risks. So, for example, catastrophic risk. Things are uncertain, but if it happens, you have actually instruments that can help a company or a corporate leader plan for it. When it comes to these kinds of uncertain situations, you have to use different techniques. And there's some techniques, I'm not the expert because I'm more of the quantitative person that has a prescribed set of outcomes and probabilities, and we do what's called Monte Carlo simulations and analysis and so on.
So is this like planning for different scenarios?
Correct. So what happens is now you have a system that's being used a lot. It's an old system called scenario analysis. I don't do much of that, but I'm very familiar with what people do. So basically, you have to mix what's called the quantitative with the qualitative. You have to have not just a bird's eye view of what's going on around the space in terms of your supply chain, in terms of your suppliers, your factor inputs, your factor outputs. Where is it going to your customers and clients? Where is it coming from? Your suppliers. You have to have full visibility of all these in both time and space. That means you have to know where everything is, your suppliers' goods, your clients' inventories, so you can actually optimize. So that is called scenario planning. What if this happens? What do I do? What if there's a COVID-19 pandemic? What do I do? So you have these kinds of, but right now we're not even talking COVID-19, we're talking about man-made disasters, that is policy making by certain unhinged people, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, so I think scenario planning sounds like the more prudent thing to do right now, but it also sounds like there's extra cost, data, analyzing data, time. How do you make the case for CEOs to actually invest in this? Because especially CEOs who are used to the old ways of planning.
Okay, so look, we have to live with the times. You have to adapt. A good leader has to be agile. So they have to know, what do I do? What are the best ways in which to deal with the circumstances and scenarios I'm dealt with? You can't say, oh, I'm used to net present value. It doesn't apply in this situation. Net present value is what we all learn. But it may not apply. You have to use different techniques. So I think corporate leaders better know what is scenario planning. They better know what all the potential scenarios can be. They have to have full visibility of both the macro and the micro trajectories that can take place, and then say, what will I do in these situations? Can I give 2 examples?
Yes, please.
Okay. I don't know if you still remember COVID-19. Yeah, most of us do, right? One airline, I remember reading about it, Korean Airlines, pivoted so quickly. None of the other big airlines, famous, top business class suites and first class suites, pivoted as quickly as Korean Airlines of all countries, Korea, which is very rigid and so traditional in the way they do things. They quickly pivoted and said, look, we're not going to make any money because there's no travel, there's no holidays, people are staying home, our commercial flights are all empty. They quickly converted the planes into cargo planes. One of the earliest to do it, I remember reading about it. I was sitting in Singapore and I said, wow, I'm stuck in Singapore, I couldn't go anywhere. I said, wow, these guys have turned around. And they're one of the few airlines that made a profit during COVID. Most people are getting bailouts, airlines, but Korean Airlines pivoted. That is what I call, they probably had the scenario, what if this happens, what do we do? Okay? I'm not sure what went through them, but that is what I would say. They had a scenario planned out, and when that scenario played out, they knew what to do. Quickly and agilely converted. That's what all CEOs and boards must do. Korea is not the epitome of good business practices. Sorry to say this, but in this case, they showed excellent agility. One more example, during the depression in the 20s, 1920s, everything was dead and all hell was breaking loose. But actually, a few companies arose. To this day, they exist. Hewlett-Packard and there's one more, I can't remember the name, Hewlett-Packard, Disney. Disney. They felt during this time, what did people want? Quality, entertainment in the case of Disney, use of technology. We're talking 1930s and so on. So that technology was advanced in those stages. They actually played to that strengths, and actually they came out of the crisis, that depression era. To this day, Hewlett-Packard exists and in different forms, and so does Disney. The other one is food and grocery companies. Many people know about Trader Joe's. It's a pretty famous brand name in US. It got its origins during Depression period because the guy who founded Trader Joe's grew up during the Depression, and he said, what do I need to provide in a food store? Affordability, because people are poor, so you need affordability. High quality, assurance that you're getting good food, nutritious, and a bit quirky. As you know, Trader Joe's, they're a bit quirky, right? People like that, and to this day, Trader Joe's exists. And there's another company called Publix grocery store, still exists, also arose out of that with the same principles. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not unique. You need to find ways to handle this. And if you are not sure how to do scenario analysis, go get the experts. There are a lot of our consultants and experts, even we, ASB, we've got 2 or 3 experts, academic experts, who do scenario planning. So what I'm trying to say is that you can't say, oh, sorry, I don't know what it is. You better go and figure out what it is and plan for these uncertain scenarios.
So it's not just about having the foresight, but also planning for different eventualities.
Correct, exactly.
Okay. And putting the time and effort to do so.
Correct.
Okay. My next question then would be how we talked about how things are so uncertain right now, where even few months feel uncertain. So how do CEOs plan for that when policies are changing overnight? And as mentioned earlier, supply chains are being tested.
Yeah. Okay, first let me step back a bit and say the world saw the best growth and the most extreme exit out of poverty in many countries during the time that China and America were best friends. Do you remember when China and America were best friends? Everyone wanted to go to America, China, they want to learn Mandarin. It was no longer Japanese or Persian, it was Mandarin. Everyone wanted to learn Mandarin. All the kids were learning Mandarin in Manhattan, all my friends' kids. So we know the world prospered during the time when they got along. But now we live in a funny world where everyone's fighting each other. The problem is, whenever, it's how should I say, when your neighbor is doing well, you want to pull the person down. We should all do well together, as opposed to pulling someone down over ideology or religion or whatever. We need to get everyone to work together. So my view is the optimal situation, the ideal situation is we all get along and trade freely without any special treatment or biases or tariffs. Don't forget, it's not just America that's imposing tariffs. A lot of emerging countries, a lot of our countries actually impose tariffs on imported goods.
Do you feel like tariffs are being used, is this a temporary measure, or do you see this as a weapon in trade for the long term?
So let me come back to that question.
Yep.
So let me finish up on that part about when you don't have that free trade and the glorious economic trading that is free of barriers, you need to form blocks, okay? You need to start trading with your favorite partner and stuff like that. But coming back, is it temporary? I think it's temporary because the one who's going to get most affected by this is the one imposing the tariffs. As soon as they start hitting a recession, as soon as the price of goods go up in their territory, because of this tariffs, it's going to happen. Mark my words, it will happen.
Can I get your sense of when would that happen?
My sense is probably if it does happen, if we don't reverse course, first quarter of 2026. That's when it'll start, inflation start creeping up. You know, I listen to some pundits saying, oh, no inflation. So far the ground, you know, in America, mid-term level is all okay, stable. No, they're living off inventories. Wait and see. The prices are bound to go up. There's no way it's not going to go up. So once inflation hits the heartlands of America and once recession starts creeping in, they're going to ask, what is going on here? And that's when you'll see the pullback. Everyone's politically astute. It's going to be the politics driving them into the tariffs, and it's going to take them out of tariffs too.
Because I know a lot of companies or leaders, they are waiting to wait and see, do I diversify right now? Do I trade with one block over the other? Or do I just wait?
Do everything. No, you got to do everything. You got to run the business. You've got to play along with the blocks. That means if your country is part of a big regional block, take advantage of that. If the government is giving you financial enterprise solutions and financing, take advantage of that. Take whatever comes because you'll need all the help you can get. So my view is take whatever you can. Go with the trade blocks. If you can, or even diversify. Come back to your question of diversification. If I'm a tire maker and I've got no operations in America, I do send tires to America, I'll get hit by the tariffs, correct? So what do? Do you start building a factory in America? Not necessary. If you want to, if it makes business sense, do it. Don't do it because it's a temporary measure, because you know it's going to go away. So if it makes business sense, do it there. And I know a few companies that actually benefited. They had the foresight to put...
Could you share some of that? I'm very interested to know.
Okay, one of them is actually GT Tire. That's why I use a tire company. GT Tire has operations in Indonesia. It's the 10th largest tire company. They have operations in Indonesia, they have in China, and they're debating, should they do one more in America, should they do here? Because and they're the largest EV brand tire maker in the world. Because for EV cars, it's heavier, you need special tires. So they're the biggest on EV. So in China, they've got like 30 or 40% of the market, because EV is huge in China. So I remember talking to the founder and the CEO, and they were saying, you know, we were debating, should we do America or not? Finally decided, you know, at some point this place is going to go up. We need to have a presence there, because it's one of the largest consumers of tires in the world. So they decided to do the factory way before all these tariffs happened, and they're so glad, because now they're just increasing production in America to meet the American demand, no tariffs. So they're not sending the Chinese tires or the Indonesian tires over there, they're using the local production. So they have the flexibility. Not everyone does.
Correct.
Those who don't have the flexibility, don't jump and say, I'm going to do factories here, I'm going to do factories. Think carefully about the long-term solution. What if I do it in America? How does it affect the other parts of the business? Can I use financial markets to hedge against those kind of situations? So you have to be a bit more flexible in your thinking as well, because you don't have to completely change the way you do your operations just because of some temporary blip in the economic trading system. But that said, if you have operations in America, ramp it up. It'll help your case.
Can you also talk about, you mentioned briefly using financial markets to hedge the system. What exactly do you mean by that?
Okay. If I am a producer of tires and I don't have any operations in America, right? And I've been exporting a large chunk of tires to America, and now I've got this tariff, I have to find alternative markets. I have to go to Indonesia, I've got to go to Europe, I've got to look for alternative markets, Africa maybe. What do I do with America? You know, my sales are going to go down. So what you can do is, if you predict your sales are going to go down because you do not have operations there, you can take on financial market positions that hedge, that counter it. That means when those sales go down, the value of your other investments go up. It's called hedging. It's a crazy example. I would invest in Goodyear. Goodyear's operations tire. Buy the stock of Goodyear. You know that when your sales go down, Goodyear's go up. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a perverse example because you're not going to invest in your counterparty, but you look for something that moves in the opposite direction.
Right.
So that when your sales come to America, you're hedged because the other parties goes up. Net, even Steven. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So what you have mentioned are very great examples, but these are companies like you with financial resources, with capacity, right? I want to bring this closer to a lot of businesses in Malaysia, mid-sized but still exposed to the global supply chain. What would be your advice to them for those who may not have the capacity to do so? And if there are other alternatives for them to use as a hedge to the instability that's happening?
You raise a very good point because in some countries, including Malaysia, SMEs, MSMEs, the micro ones as well, are about 40 to 60% of the economy, and they give about 70% of the jobs. So they're a very important part of the economy. We tend to forget them. And they're part of the cog and wheel system that feeds into the multinational companies. So first of all, there are two ways. One is the SMEs have been very slow to adapt in terms of AI, in terms of digital transformation, in terms of sustainability. You know, they have to be faster in adapting, first thing. So that's a bit of the internal part. Externally, the government needs to provide more support to them. The Intels and the Microsofts and all don't need support. It's the SMEs. So governments should avail to SMEs more support, soft loans, enterprise financing schemes, and stuff like that to keep them going until the uncertainty wears out. So my view is both sides. SMEs have the role to play. They have to spend some money to upskill themselves. And sometimes there's a lot of subsidized programs. Even ASB runs a lot of subsidized programs for SMEs, subsidized by the government. You know, the ministries of finance or whatever would subsidize, or Ministry of Digital would subsidize some of these programs. So they need to find those programs that will help them upskill.
Going back to your earlier statement about risk management, a lot of companies, they plan with risk in mind, but what about capturing opportunities when things are volatile? Are companies planning for that?
It depends which stage you are in the life cycle. If you're a very mature company and you've got a very good set of tools and people to handle it, I would say yes. But if you're early stage, think about a family business. I don't think they have all these tools and know-how and knowledge. So my view is that you can't just stop business, right? You have to survive. So for them, they have to first tide over. And to tide over, I just told you the methods. There are a lot of government programs, I mean, not just in Malaysia, Singapore. I've been through them where I've seen these programs that help them tide over. Then you have to plan for growth. How do I get this business to what I want it to be? You know, a big listed company or a multinational, whatever the case may be. So I think we need role models as well. People who have been through it have come up. You know, Malaysia has a lot of family businesses that are now global. You know, they can also serve as role models and do sort of mentoring and so on. So we need to find a way to bring these peoples together, the ones who are early in the life cycle and those who are later, so they also can aspire. I want to be like this family business, which is now global, you know. There's so many, I don't have to mention, these are household names to many of us, but they started as family businesses. They were small businesses too. I mean, the Kwok Foundation, Kwok Brothers, was a small little sundry shop in Johor many years ago. And look at it now. It's properties, it's hotels, it's plantations. You know, they grew. It's a local Malaysian company from Johor. So we should aspire to be like them and do the right thing along the way. Sustainability, all that should also be part of our DNA. It pays off. Believe me, all these things pay off. It helps towards your growth.
Okay. Now, CEOs these days, they're not just caught in business cycles, but also political cycles. So there are two things right now. What is your advice? What are the three things, if you could share with us, that they should be looking at this stage of growth and at this stage of the political cycle that we are in
See,
right
there's
now.
some things that are controllable, others that are uncontrollable.
Yes.
Leave the uncontrollable to your leaders, political leaders. Let them figure it out. Support them in getting the right solutions. As you know, there's a lot of negotiations going on. You can or may not be a part of it. You know, you're not in control of that. So you let the parties that are working towards it work that out. In the meantime, you bolster your defenses internally. Just be prepared, because life is never going to be smooth. So these companies really have to ramp up. I've been to events where the government organizes locally, and not just Malaysia and Singapore, where there's all these incentives being offered, but the take-up is very low. They say, no, it's not for me. I would prefer to just run this mom and pop thing. No, you can't think that way. That means you'll never be beyond a mom and pop. If you want to become world-class, you need to avail yourselves to what's available. And I can tell you there's a lot, you may say, oh, Malaysia may not have it. No, we have actually a lot of incentive programs for small and medium businesses. So actually when things are most uncertain, when things are most chaotic, it's the time you take advantage of these things. And I feel it as actually a positive outcome. We'll all learn how to change. COVID made us pivot very quickly to technology, to more advanced tools. We would not have been so fast into technology-driven solutions if not for COVID, because we had to sit at home. We can't go around. So we had to rely on technology. So you see what I'm saying? Sometimes bad events can lead to good outcomes. So never view anything as a setback. Take it as a challenge to do better. And you must have the heart to do it. So if you're still focusing on SMEs, we're talking to SMEs here, I would say just go out there and do your best and avail yourselves to all the systems. Think big. We've got to think big. Malaysia is a very talented country. As someone, I'm Malaysian, but I've lived abroad for many, many years. I can tell you when I come back, I see that this is a very talented, creative society. But we need to punch above our weight.
I like that you're very positive and also pragmatic at the same time. But I do want to get your opinion about, so yes, there are opportunities that leaders should go for, but what about blind spots that leaders here tend to underestimate about training?
You're talking about, again, businesses,
leaders? Yes.
Yeah, you know, you can't blame, I mean, we all have blind spots. And that's where I feel the collective knowledge is always important. Don't be centrally located. Even when you, let me give you an example. When the scenario analysis is done, there are spectacular failures. My colleague who told me about, who's an expert in this, spectacular failures. You know why? Mostly it was being centrally planned out of headquarters for some problem which is happening downstream. You need to make sure you get feedback from the ground. What is the most optimal scenario in this situation? So one of the things we have to learn also is to listen to the ground, to be able to empower people, because your staff and employees can be your greatest feedback mechanism, telling you what's wrong on the ground. Why is inventories low? Why are supplies not going the way they're going? So you need to learn how to listen. So the scenario planning of the leaders, the blind spot, what I would say is, you can avoid blind spots by listening, learning, and empowering. Let your staff. I'll tell you personally, I used to run a business too. I'm telling you, the reason why we were successful, and we were pretty damn successful, was because our staff were empowered to. Around the world, I had teams in Europe, in US, they were empowered to make decisions, and that was what caused them to be so motivated and to build. Then your blind spot disappears, because someone is watching your blind spot for you, you know.
This leads to my next question, actually.
I hope it's not as tough.
Now, just the final few minutes that we have, I do wonder, from where you sit in such a volatile environment, right? Which leadership traits separate those who succeed and those who fail, who struggle? Let's not say fail, who struggle.
What separates the two?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that leaders, and I'm speaking from experience, I may not look old, but actually I am, and I'm not as young as I look. I've got a lot of experience. You need to be agile. You cannot be fixed in your mindset about the way the world works. You have to adapt. You have to take information in. In probability theory, we call it Bayesian learning. Bayesian's after a mathematician who said, take all the available information and change and adapt to that information. Don't be stuck in your old ways. It's like driving. I remember Nobel laureate Robert Merton was here a few weeks ago. He was saying it's like driving by looking in the rear view mirror. No one does that. You don't look at the back to go forward. You have to anticipate, to look forward. Where could the blind spots be? Where could the potential accidents? You have to anticipate the future, not look at the rear mirror and drive. I thought it was a perfect example. So my view is people have to learn how, leaders have to learn how to, there's no such thing as blind spot. You have to learn how to let go and empower people to give you good feedback. Don't be afraid to be criticized for a wrong move. Adapt quickly. So my experience tells me agility is very key. Agility and flexibility in the way you operate your business and the way you think about issues.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor. Always a pleasure listening to you and your advice, and great to have you on the show. Hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia.